My starting point is not to worry about the politics. My starting point is to focus on what makes sense, what works. What should we be doing to make sure that our children are safe, that we're reducing the incidence of gun violence.
President Obama speaking today about what it will take to keep this country's children safe. Joining me now is a man who sees the issue quite differently. Former Congressman Asa Hutchinson leads the NRA's initiative for armed guards at schools. Welcome to you, Mr. Hutchinson. Explain to me why the answer to a massacre at a school that kills 20 young children in this hideous manner and 6 adults is to arm people at every school in America, over 120,000 schools. Why is that the solution?
Well, Piers, I don't think you're quite accurately stating what my job is. And what I've said is that, one, it should be a decision of the local school district as to what kind of security you have in the schools. I do believe that one element of that would be trained armed presence for schools that particularly have a particular risk. And today we see from Sandy Hook Elementary that virtually every school in America has some risk. And so a logical response to that is to provide greater protection and security. But this is a decision of the local school district. And what my job is to bring some of the best security experts in the country together and look at what we can do better in our schools to provide parents assurance that their children are going to be safe, to make sure this does not happen again. But it has to be a decision by the local school district. But if I have a choice, yes. If my grandchildren have a choice of going to a school that has a trained armed presence versus a school that doesn't, I think the one with a trained armed presence there would have a much better chance of being safe.
Now, this is one of the theories that have been put out by the NRA, which has garnered some support, and I don't want to ridicule you for it. I understand that many Americans will listen to that and think it makes perfect sense. My issue is when you listen to the lady I just interviewed, you know, who lost her niece at Sandy Hook, who's a mother of 4, who can't think of anything worse than having guns around the children all day long. And I shared that concern. And, you know, although I've said this to some of the other gun rights people before, is that I come from a country where we don't have any guns. So it's a very different culture. I get that. And I don't want to play that card with you. But there is a real fear that if you start loading up firearms around school children all over America, what you're basically doing is kind of militarizing schools. And then where do you stop that? You have to militarize almost everywhere that children may be. And that is everywhere. So America becomes this kind of paramilitary country.
Piers, you're absolutely wrong. First of all, President Clinton initiated the Cops in the Schools program. We presently have resource officers that are armed, trained guards in about 1/3 of our schools. They're not military encampments. They're safe environments in which the children feel very secure around with that kind of protection. You think about, in your country, England has an armed presence for international flights going in and out of England in a very sensitive environment called the airplanes. Post 9/11, people said guns have no place in the cockpit or in the passenger plane. But in fact, they've worked very well because they're trained, they're
well, actually,
deterrent,
let me pick
and
you
it's
up on
worked
that.
very effectively.
Well, actually, no, what's been effective on planes is an outright ban on any weapons, any guns. That's what's been effective. The reason you don't see people using guns on planes is they've been banned. And this brings me to the point of what I've been trying to get to on this show, which is it's not about removing everybody's guns in America. It's a complete fallacy when people spin out that line. And it's designed, I think, to instill the kind of fear President Obama talked about today, trying to make people think, oh, my God, they're coming for my guns. And then all what happens is a lot of Americans go out and buy more of these guns and more ammunition, and so it spirals on. Why can't you see the plane analogy, which you brought up, as the perfect example of what you should be doing, which is dealing with the chicken and not all the eggs? The chicken is the gun. The gun situation in America, to many people, seems increasingly ridiculous, where a young, deranged man can very easily access an AR-15 assault weapon and take a magazine with 100 bullets and commit mass murder. The last 4 shootings in America have involved that specific weapon and have led to complete carnage. It's that
Piers,
people want to remove. It's not regular guns, handguns, or pistols. What is your answer to that?
Well, first of all, guns are prohibited in the airplane. They're also prohibited in the school. What we've got to make sure is that somebody who violates the law, the children are still protected. And that's why we have federal air marshals on airplanes, and that's why we have more security that we need to apply to our school. Let me come back to the issue of safety. My job is to come up with some good solutions to help our school districts and our states that are looking at this. When the president comes out with his proposals, I do hope that he provides a federal partnership for providing funds for training of the armed presence in the schools to help our local school districts. Right now, virtually every school district in America is looking at better ways to assure the safety of their children.
But here's the counter-argument.
Including this.
Here's the counter-argument to this, is that it's not new. I mean, we've had armed security at schools and universities before, and it just hasn't been effective. At Columbine, at Virginia Tech, most notably at Fort Hood, the most protected place on earth almost, you had a complete outrage and massacre there. Just having armed people around isn't necessarily the answer. I read a very convincing argument against it today, for example, where somebody's saying you have these people, they get trained, they're armed, and they're twitchy, they're concerned, they're not quite sure what they're looking for, and they get an odd-looking character turns up. You could end up with all sorts of really unfortunate incidents. How do you kind of regulate that?
Well, certainly you need to look beyond simply a trained armed presence, and the training is critically important in a sensitive environment. And I think we ought to have more standardized training and enhanced training for anyone who is a protective person at a school. But secondly, right now we have about 1/3 of the schools that have an armed presence. In California, I talked to the school resource officers there. I believe they have about 500 in the Los Angeles. They have them in Philadelphia. Do you want to pull those all out of the schools and not have any armed presence there when the local school district says it's important to protect our children? But it is more than that. That's why we need to look at architecture. Let me finish my answer, please. We need to look at the architecture of the schools. We need to look at other technologies, how to keep them safe. It is much more than just being an armed presence.
What are you going to arm them with that's going to protect these children from a deranged young person with an AR-15 that can fire up to 100 bullets in a minute? What weapon will you give your trained security people?
We'll give them what they need to do the job to protect the children.
Right, just to clarify, would you give them AR-15s?
This is the experts, the school safety experts, the national law enforcement people. They will recommend what is the best way to protect the children in this environment. I would give them a weapon so they can take the shooter out. And if there's not a school resource officer that can be there, I don't want to be pedantic about this.
I just want to clarify whether the 120,000 armed people you're going to put into America's schools, are they going to be armed with semi-automatic assault rifles too? Because that seems to me the only logical way that they could have any chance against somebody that has one of those killing machines. You give them a handgun, they have 1, 2, or 3 bullets at a guy who's firing possibly 100 in a minute. So I'm asking you again, just to clarify, would you give these trained people you're going to train up AR-15 assault rifles?
I disagree with your point. I believe that a person with a firearm that is trained can be very effective. And also, I question whether if, just like somebody doesn't rush into the cockpit of an airplane because they know there's a pilot that very well could have a weapon there. I believe that you have to have layered security in the schools. We're going to be looking at the experts as to how this can be done. We're going to give them model training programs. We're going to give the schools greater resources online. This is a very serious effort in school safety. And I hope the Vice President, whenever he makes the recommendations, the President includes school safety as a large part of the equation as to what needs to be done in the future.
But just very quickly, you don't think removing AR-15s would help safety?
I think that Congress could pass a half a dozen laws, just like they did with the ban on Columbine, and yet the tragedy occurred. And so they can pass laws, but I think we will make more progress and keep our children safer if we focus on how we can better provide a secure environment in the schools, and that's what I'm addressing.
Okay. Mr. Hutchinson, thank you very much for joining me. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Coming up, the man who says the NRA has held Congress hostage for years, John Walsh of America's Most Wanted, says this country can't put up with gun violence any longer. Like so many of the parents of Sandy Hook, my next guest sadly also knows the pain of losing a young son to violent crime. John Walsh is the host of America's Most Wanted on Lifetime. Welcome to you, John. You were listening there to the conversation with Asa Hutchinson. You know him. Very much the thoughts, I think, of the NRA generally. Their answer to almost all these massacres is just more guns. What do you think of it?
Well, first I've got to say I'm thankful that you keep this dialogue going. It has to be a civil dialogue. And I don't think it's evading all the important issues by saying we're going to put more guns in schools. The NRA is supported by the gun manufacturers, and I know Asen, he's a good man. Is that the way that you're going to make a Sandy Hook stop? And to say, well, we'll just sell, what, hundreds of thousands more guns and put armed guards in every school in America?
Well, I thought the president had it absolutely right today. You know, he made it very clear that he just thinks there's a direct link now between the fear driven by the NRA and others after these massacres. The fear is quite deliberately put out there to drive more sales, to make more money. It's a commercial deal.
They're the most powerful marketing and PR firm on Capitol Hill. I've been going up there for 31 years, walking those halls and trying to get Congress to do reasonable things for victims, change the laws because the level of violence is so unacceptable. You said it a million times. We are 20 times more violent than the closest first world country. We are a first world country. We are the richest, most powerful country in the history of the world. And we have the most violence, the most guns, and the biggest problems that we seem to keep skirting because Congress won't do anything about it. They're in gridlock.
When people say to you, John, as I said to me, you know, you're anti the Constitution, you're anti the Second Amendment, I'm entitled to all these assault weapons. What do you say? I'm
a gun owner. I've hunted my whole life. I have a ranch in Florida. I shoot quail. I don't need an AK-47. I don't need an Uzi. I don't need a MAC-10. I don't need a 50-bullet clip when I go out quail hunting. I have shotguns. I have pistols. No one's ever going to take my guns away. There is no dictator. There is no foreign country that's going to take over America and take our guns away. This is reasonable, thoughtful. The ban on assault weapons is a reasonable start. We've got to start somewhere, Piers. We have to.
Well, that's what I feel. I mean, what's the option? To do nothing, to just allow the proliferation of guns out there of that type, this military-style weapon. That's what they are. And those that try and say to me, well, you know, what about handguns? Handguns have a completely different capability and power to one of these AR-15s, particularly when they're loaded with 100-bullet magazines, as the shooter at Aurora showed. He shot up an entire movie theatre in a matter of a few minutes.
And bought 6,000 rounds of ammunition.
With no regulation.
Over the internet.
Did it anonymously?
These guns are for killing other men. I hunt men down for a living. I've caught 1,200 guys in 35 countries. I have profiled some of the some of the biggest sociopaths in the world. And 1 in 5 Americans are mentally ill, have some problem, but we have no mental health service anywhere in the United States.
And you mix that with 40% of all gun sales in America having no checks, no background check, no database, nothing. I find that a terrifying cocktail.
No one wants to take anybody's guns away. Those 2 boys went to that gun show before Columbine. They weren't old enough to buy guns. They got a girl who was 18 that had a driver's license. Nobody asked them, what are you going to do with those semi-automatic weapons? Why do you need so many rounds of ammunition? And the next day they went and they killed all those people. And it has happened multiple times. Background checks don't exist, Piers. We need better background checks. I have no problem waiting 10 days for my permit. I have no problem taking a psychological test. I have no problem taking a gun course. We need to make better background checks.
John, as always, you make complete sense. You're host of America's Most Wanted. Please come back soon. I'd love to talk about this more on Lifetime.
Stay at it, Piers.
I will. Coming up, the Hollywood star who owns guns but is also taking a stand on assault weapons. Rob Lowe joins me next. You're an independent and you've sort of said, look, I want these guys to court me as a voter. In that courting process, what should they be doing? How are they going to hook you in? What are you looking for?
They need to personally come to my house, Piers. They need to come over, and they need to watch some football with me and spend some quality FaceTime. Look, I'm no different than an Iowa farmer. I think I deserve exactly the same respect as an Iowa corn farmer. Come and spend some politics as retail. Come to my house.
It was a year ago when the absurdly tanned Rob Lowe stopped by to talk about the White House race, and the Hollywood star is passionate about politics and many other things. And it's good to have you back, Rob Lowe.
By the way, none of the candidates took me up on that offer. Not one of them came to my house.
Nobody called, nobody rang.
No,
nobody turned up.
It was sad. I felt it shows you what kind of juice I really have.
What did you make of the race in the end?
I was really surprised that it wasn't closer.
Yeah.
I can't believe that President Obama turned out bigger numbers than he thought, than a lot of people thought he would. I was surprised. It was all of a sudden, it felt like it was called and it was over. I looked around and said, it's over? That quick? Really?
But I thought of you, funny enough, because I was rewatching for the third time the entire West Wing phenomenon, all 7 seasons. And what was great about the Bartlett campaign was he was a great campaigner and had great campaigners around him.
Right.
Obama, in the end, I think, won convincingly because he runs a brilliant campaign.
He does. And you know what? He communicates and connects with people. I mean, people could say he's aloof. I mean, we all know the knocks that we've heard about President Obama. And maybe they're true, maybe they're not. But the guy connects. And in the end of the day, that's always going to carry, I think.
What do you make of his nominations so far? We've got Hagel at Defense, Lowe Treasury, Kerry State, and Brennan CIA.
I'm very happy about John Kerry. John's a friend, and I think he'll be great in the job. He's clearly wanted it. Although, you know, Hillary has been amazing. What an amazing secretary.
Tough act to follow.
Really, right? But I think the appointments are good. It sounds like defense is going to be a fight. That'll be fun to watch. I like a good political row.
Let's turn to guns. I've been talking about this a lot recently, particularly since Sandy Hook, but also before that. You're an independent, politically, in many ways, but what do you make of the gun debate? And I'll tell you why I ask, because in Britain, it's not a political thing. Never has been. It's never been left or right.
Right.
It's more of a human reaction to when these things happen. We've got to do something. Why is it so political in America?
Well, it's a part, I think, of how our country was formed. We did have to take up arms to form our country. So
to get rid of us.
To get rid of, I didn't want to say it, but if you're going to bring it up, to get you guys out of our hair. So there's that. It's in our Constitution. Look, I own guns. You know, I'm gone a lot. I have a wife. I have 2 kids. I know how to keep them. They're in a gun safe.
How many do you have?
Get them. I have 3.
What types?
I don't have an assault weapon.
Right.
That's true.
So you have handguns, do you?
Exactly.
Right. See, I have
and I'm a sportsman. You know, and I shoot skeet, and I grew up in the Midwest, so that's a part of my culture. So I understand them in a way that perhaps people living in more urban areas don't have that history.
But I totally understand why you would do that, why you think you have the right to do that under the Second Amendment, and I have total respect for it. You want to defend your family and do some hunting or shooting or whatever it may be. I just don't get the assault weapon thing. I don't get why responsible gun owners in this country aren't rising up together and saying, you know what, they have no place in a civilized society.
Let me ask you this, because I know you've been really leading the charge in this. I haven't heard anyone articulate to me what would really be the problem with an assault weapons ban. We've had it before.
But you had a kind of woolly ban. It had so many exemptions to it.
Right, and that's the issue. People say...
Well, if you leave hundreds of thousands of them still on the streets, it's not a ban. I mean, in Britain, when we had our Sandy Hook at Dunblane, there was a national ban on handguns and assault weapons, and they all got taken away. If you were found with one, you were sent to jail.
So they literally came and took them away.
But this word confiscation causes mass terror in America. You are not taking my guns.
Yeah, no, people don't like it. They don't like it. And look, it's a complicated issue. I think one of the problems for me, and I know I've heard you talk about this, and I'm glad, is that I think the mental health, parenting, personal responsibility.
So video games.
The first shooter video game stuff, which, look, admittedly, I missed that generationally. So it's not a thing for me. I've never played them. I don't really get it. My kids do. And I just think kids growing up blowing people away blood, pulp everywhere, and then turning it off and going to have a sandwich.
Yeah.
I don't think that is good, and I think that it needs to be a large conversation. It sounds like we're starting to have it as a nation, and that can only be good.
But as a gun owner, you would have no problem if President Obama said, I really want to push for these assault rifles in particular to be taken out of circulation.
Look, I wouldn't, because I like guns, and I don't want to own an assault rifle. I wouldn't know what to do with one. I wouldn't know why I would want one. I also see that if you're a law-abiding person and you bought it under the law, having it taken from you, I can see why people would have a problem with that. But if they don't do that, as you point out, it's not really a ban, is it?
No.
And I'm no social anthropologist, but I do think that the last thing viewers want is another Hollywood actor telling them anything about guns, pro or con.
Let's take a break. Let's come back and talk about your new role, which is as the prosecutor in the Casey Anthony case, which was an equally emotive issue that divided the nation.
Yes.
I want to know what it feels like to be that guy.
Say and I became friends while volunteering to mentor Indianapolis teens. I gave them tours of the State House. Jim gave them Colts tickets and autographed jerseys. They preferred Jim. I wonder why.
Funny stuff there from Rob Lowe, who, as he told me himself, is a funny guy. That was Parks and Recreation. But he doesn't shy away from drama either. His new work is Lifetime's new TV movie, Prosecuting Casey Anthony. OK, this is fascinating, because I watched your last one, the Drew Peterson TV drama movie. It was fantastic.
Thank you.
You were compellingly evil. I think that was the last time we spoke. Again, here you have a very polarizing figure about whom there remains a lot of doubt. And no one's quite sure, as they were with Drew Peterson, whether they're really guilty or not. And yet most people think they are.
Yeah.
Did you follow the Casey Anthony thing as it happened? Were you as enthralled as everybody else?
Well, first of all, I probably watch more cable news than any human should be. I see too much of you. I just do.
You can never see too much of me.
You know, you would think that. I understand that, and that's perfectly fine. So you couldn't escape it if you wanted to when it was on. In terms of the day-by-day minutia of the trial, I didn't follow it. And that's when I read Jeff Ashton's book that the movie's based on.
He's the prosecutor.
Who I play in the movie. And
right.
I was really surprised at some of the twists and turns, some of the overreach, and some of the things that went on to lead us to the point where the country was so shocked by this verdict.
What is fascinating about him, Ashton, the prosecutor, was that his record is extraordinary. 68 out of 70 homicide convictions, 12 out of 12 death penalty convictions, almost a perfect record. And everybody assumed he was going to have another tick.
Yes.
This would be a conviction. And there was real shock when she walked. Did you get to meet Jeff Ashton?
He actually came to visit the day I did the closing argument.
Really?
Which was...
So he watched you deliver his...
He watched me deliver his closing argument, and it's a direct transcript. It's what he actually said, and he's by the monitor while I'm out in the courtroom, which is an exact replica of the courtroom in Orlando.
What did he say to you about it?
It was pretty surreal. I almost didn't want to go back and see him for fear that he would give me the "oh boy" face. But I think he was pretty happy.
Well, of course he's going to be happy. I mean, he's got Rob Lowe playing him. I mean, Jesus. I mean, how much better can it get?
Well,
I want you for my Lifetime movie.
All right, I'm there, my friend. I'm always there for you.
It'll be called Deported, because it will happen eventually.
You're not going anywhere. I won't let it happen.
Thank you. Let's take a look at the clip from this movie, Prosecuting Casey Anthony.
The doctors are key to explaining why Casey didn't report her daughter's disappearance.
The 31 days and nights.
I don't see why we need all this mystery here.
Why don't we stop playing games? Just tell us what happened.
All right. The truth is, Kaylee was never murdered.
Okay.
She accidentally drowned in the pool on June 16th. And Casey trusted someone she never should have to take care of it.
Like who?
George Anthony.
You know what? Bring it.
Would you have personally convicted Casey Anthony from all you now know about the case?
It's my personal opinion that she absolutely had something to do with her daughter's death. I don't know if it was an accident or if it was premeditated. That I don't know to this day, but there's no doubt in my mind at all that she's responsible.
I spoke to her briefly, arranged by one of her defense attorneys. And like all these kind of evil characters that get portrayed that way,
right.
Underneath it, there was this kind of quite softly spoken, very normal sounding woman who'd obviously been through complete hell and probably will be for the rest of her life. Do you have any sympathy for the people that get caught up in these things?
This one would be a tough one, Piers. You know, I'm a father. I've got 2 kids. Child neglect is an unthinkable thing, and child murder is off of the scale.
Well, it looks riveting. I've only seen clips, but I'm looking forward to seeing the whole thing. It's airing on the January 19th at 8 p.m. on Lifetime. Parks and Recreations airs Thursdays at 8:30 on NBC.